Hey everyone, this is Mr. Finocchiaro. Just wanted to post our Spanish-American War review. So you should be just about finishing up your assignments for this week. We have been looking into this war, the lasting effects, and then of course, what was life like for foreigners and for Americans moving forward after this turning point and this very important event. So I just wanted to post this video. As you watch this video, we ask you to write down some main ideas, some facts, and just simply some notes on the Spanish-American War. But by this time, you should have at least a decent handle on some of the important vocabulary, some important players, and also what were the essential causes and effects of the war. But let's just quickly go through this. And this was just really for review purposes and to ensure that you all are on the same page and that you are Spanish-American War experts. If you have any questions or concerns along the way, please reach out to Ms. Doherty or I. We would be more than happy to answer any of your questions as soon as we can via Google Classroom. Okay, guys, so let's get started. So here is the Spanish-American War review. Okay, I left some images up here for you all. The first image here is of a newspaper. Some of you, or if not all, should know that this is an example of yellow journalism. We are going to dive into greater detail as to what yellow journalism was and the influence it had on the war. Right here in the center image, we have a graphic picture of the sinking of the USS Maine, which was a United States warship that was attacked. And this sparked the beginning of the Spanish-American War. And then here we have a group of soldiers fighting the war, and a very important person right here in the center who is a soldier now, but possibly a president later. So we will dive into further detail about that in this review video as well. Okay? So before we dive into the war, we're just going to review the importance of imperialism. Now, we have discussed in great detail what imperialism was in our Global 10 class, and now we are seeing how important imperialism is in, of course, the United States history that we are studying. So imperialism, again, was a country's way in extending their power and influence in the world, and they could do that in a nonviolent and a violent way. So diplomacy, either through treaties, talks, or agreements, can take over a weaker country and to gain power and influence through that way. Or they can use military force, either through war or violent ways of taking over other weaker countries to gain complete and total control of those areas and to extend their power and influence in the world. Remember, imperialism is all about extending one's power through the amount of land and wealth they gain in the world. So during this war, both America and Spain were countries who exercised imperialism. So this was a war centered around smaller territories in the Americas that these two countries were fighting over. So I have here, this is a political cartoon of the United States. Any symbol of the United States you may see in Uncle Sam here in this image. Here is our national bird, the bald eagle. And the bald eagle is spreading its wings over the Western Hemisphere. And we're going to talk more about that. But this is just showing the amount of influence that the United States has during this time in such a large area. From the birth of America, America here is being seen as a small child, and then as the years progress, the more powerful the United States becomes, the more land, power, influence, and control it gains. And then here in 1898, America is being depicted as someone who has all of the wealth, someone who has all of the food, and all of the control and power of the world. And then you just see the other hands of the countries wanting some of that power, influence, and even resources as well. Resources is very important when we talk about imperialism, and was very important when we discussed it last year. And then here we have a graphic that is specifically dedicated to this war. The war was being fought over the territory of Cuba. And you could see here that there was anarchy, and America was pulling the people of Cuba out of the anarchy or the Spanish misrule. So the Spanish was gaining control of that area and was in charge of that area. Cuba was a colony of the Spanish, and of course, America got involved and helped Cuba gain their independence. But of course, the United States had their own agenda as well. They were looking to gain further power and influence by kicking the Spanish out of that area and then imposing their own views, power, and influence in that area themselves. So it's all about the power, it's all about the influence when we talk about the Spanish American War. Here, this is the foreign policy that the United States practiced. Now, Mrs. Doherty did have a short review on the foreign policy, what it is. Foreign policy is just the relationship that the United States or any given country may have on the world, other countries outside of that country. And there are a number of aspects to foreign policy that Ms. Doherty discusses. So here, the United States practices the Monroe Doctrine. Now, the Monroe Doctrine warned European nations that the United States will protect any country in the Western Hemisphere. So I did include a map here. So this is the Western Hemisphere. Now, the Western Hemisphere includes territories as north as Canada, all the way to Central America, North America, Central America, and then South America. So during this time, the United States said to the world that if any country decides to mess or get in the business or in the middle of possibly colonizing or extending their power in these regions or areas here, that the United States will get involved and will protect those weaker, and less powerful countries. So this did pose some problems for countries in the Eastern Hemisphere. Eastern Hemisphere included countries in Europe, more specifically, and in Asia. Now, I did include some pictures here. This is just symbolizing Uncle Sam protecting the Western Hemisphere. Okay. Here, again, Uncle Sam is putting his hat down on the Western Hemisphere, telling the European countries in the Eastern Hemisphere to back off, that this is more or less our area, and we have a right to protect the countries in the Western Hemisphere. Again, it's all about power, it's all about influence in a given location. And over here, I have a picture. This symbolizes the United States policing the Western Hemisphere using the Monroe Doctrine. So again, they are just making sure that no European countries, or any countries for that matter, are meddling or getting involved in the relations in the Western Hemisphere. Okay? Just wanted to discuss the importance of yellow journalism. I did talk about it in our opening slide. Yellow journalism was a form of storytelling. It presented really little to no accurate news, but it exaggerated to the public what was happening in the world. It was eye catching. Now, eye catching means that it caught the attention of the people reading the newspapers, and it really was to increase sales. But again, this influenced Americans in what they believed and also the actions that the country should take. So I did include some examples of yellow journalism during this time. So it really was the influence of yellow journalism that more or less convinced the Americans that we should go to war with Spain. Now, on my next slide, I'm going to talk about what Spain did to the United States, but it was exaggerated. Journalists did use newspapers. Now, this was their form of media. They didn't have the World Wide Web, they didn't have cell phones or computers or even telephones. What they had was newspapers, books, writings. So this was the people's form of communication and getting the news out there. So if these are the ways that the people are learning about the world and what other countries may be doing to us, it sparked anger. It sparked a sense of energy within the American people to fight back and to fight in a war and declare war on Spain for what they did. Now, what they did is you could read the headlines here that they destroyed the warship Maine, and it was the work of an enemy. Battleship Maine blown up in the harbor of Havana. So there was very little information that was true, but it was exaggerated to have the people believe certain facts and information in a certain way. Remember the Maine. That's what the yellow journalists would write in their articles. And you could see here, even the picture that was painted of the explosion or the destruction of the USS Maine was exaggerated. Now, this was an actual photo of the USS Maine destroyed. Okay, you could see here the difference in the exaggeration of that photo. But again, this was the immediate cause of the Spanish-American War. Okay, this Spanish did attack the USS Maine, which was more or less policing an area and making sure Americans were safe from anti-Spanish revolutions that were happening. And again, yellow journalists jumped on this subject, and their goal was to not only sell newspapers, but convince the people in America that this was a deliberate attack, that this was a ruthless attack, and that we must retaliate. We must have our revenge and declare war on Spain. So, before I discuss the end of the war, it was a short lived war. It was only a couple of months. The United States did, of course, outweigh and win the war from Spain and defeated Spain. The war did end with the Treaty of Paris. The Treaty of Paris was signed to end the war. Now, the effects of the war did pave the way as far as on both sides. Now, it did create uh, a path for the United States to transform into a world superpower. Now, at the end of the war, the United States gained control of territories in that area in Central and South America, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. And now there were no more Spanish influence in Cuba as well. So this war really ended any Spanish influence or colonies that they had at this time. So the Spanish withdrew all of their forces and their influence, and those territories either became free or were highly influenced or handed over to the United States. So the United States became a world superpower because they gained additional power, natural resources, and land in South and Central America, which then in turn transformed them into a super world power. As for Spain, it ended most of their influence and, and adventures in the Western Hemisphere. And it actually helped them out in the end because it led to economic and cultural success because they decided to focus on their country back in the Eastern Hemisphere and back home. So it did lead to 20 years of economic and cultural success on their part. So this was a short lived war, a swift and easily won war by the United States, defeating the Spanish forces. But again, it was influenced by yellow journalism. The immediate cause was the sinking of the USS Maine, which then catapulted the United States into the Spanish American War. But again, the war was deeply rooted in the desire of power. Power, natural resources, land, and influence, more or less, also known as imperialism. So I hope that this short review video on the Spanish American War was helpful. Just going to click back to the beginning. Now, I did mention and ask you all who was this man in the beginning. This was an important man. He actually did become a future president. Okay. Now, a future president was Theodore Roosevelt. He fought in the Spanish American War, and he took the Monroe Doctrine and continued to move forward with it. So, as the United States became a superpower, Theodore Roosevelt was elected president, and he described his foreign policy by this quote that I put right here for you. Speak softly and carry a big stick. You will go far. So, speak softly, meaning to have the patience and understanding in listening to other countries around the world, and carry a big stick. Carrying a big stick means to have a strong military force behind you and to show and inform the foreign countries around the world that you have a very impressive large military. So he's telling the people that he wants the world to be scared of the United States, but the United States has the patience and understanding and listening to what those countries may have to say. And he wants those countries to also understand that we have one of the strongest, or if not strongest, military at that time. So speak softly, but know that the people know that we are carrying a big stick and that practicing this foreign policy moving forward during his presidency will take you far. Now, he learned from the Monroe Doctrine firsthand by fighting directly in the Spanish American War, and he was a valiant soldier and led the United States to a speedy victory in that fact. So he did take the Monroe Doctrine and then make it his own and take it that much further. So this was the foreign policy of the United States, and we shall see how things will change studying our next topics in the upcoming weeks. Guys, I hope you found this review helpful. If you have any questions or concerns, or if there is anything that you would like me to re-explain, please reach out to Miss Doherty or I via Google Classroom. We will be more than happy to answer any questions or concerns in the comments below, and that would be great. Now remember, guys, from this review video, you need to record 3 to 5 main ideas, notes, facts, important information that you learned, and we will talk to you soon. Guys, we miss you very much, and we hope all is well, and thank you very much for watching. Have a great day. Bye-bye.